Jack found Uncle Phuong standing in front of the abandoned house. It was 11 in the morning. Jack had been walking back from the timber yard with 2 bundles of bamboo poles balanced over his shoulder for the chairs by the pond, the ones Tu Tien wanted to build before the weekend, and he had taken the shortcut past the row of empty plots, the way he always took the shortcut. And there was Uncle Phuong, standing at the gate of the house that had been empty for 3 years, the one Tu Tien had once called a graveyard for a family, Ly's father. The man who had not been able to keep his own daughters safe, who had disappeared after she was sent to Nam's house, who had not been seen in the village for almost a year and a half. He was wearing a clean shirt. He was holding a folder under his arm. He turned when he heard Jack's footsteps. "Jack," he said, very quietly. "I was hoping you would come this way." Jack set the bamboo poles down against the fence. "Back," he said. He did not say anything else for a moment. He looked at the older man, at the clean shirt, at the folder, at the face that had aged 5 years in 18 months. "How long have you been standing here?" Jack said. 2 hours. "Why didn't you come to the farm?" "I wasn't sure I had the right." Jack looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up the bamboo poles. "Come on," he said. Tu Tien made tea this morning. Tu Tien was at the market. She had left at sunrise with a basket of melons the last harvest before the dry season set in, and she would not be back until early afternoon. Jack had known this when he invited Uncle Phuong back. He had decided, walking the older man home, that whatever was about to happen should happen with one of them first and the other second. It was the kind of conversation that needed staggering. He made fresh tea. Bak Phuong sat at the wooden table on the veranda, with his folder beside him, and his hands folded in his lap, and a posture that suggested a man who had been practicing how to sit in this exact configuration for several days. "Bak, yes. Drink your tea before it cools." The older man picked up his cup. His hands were not entirely steady. He drank slowly. He set the cup down. He looked at the folder beside him. "Jack." "Yes, Bak. I have come to do 2 things today. The first is to apologize. The second is to give you something. I would like to apologize first, because if you do not accept the apology, you also cannot accept the gift." Jack waited. "I failed her," Bak Phuong said. "I failed Ly. When she was sent to that house, I knew the family was wrong. I knew the mother was hard. I knew the son drank. I told myself she would manage. I told myself she was a grown woman. I told myself many things that were not true, so I would not have to do the difficult thing, which was to bring her home." He paused. He had clearly rehearsed this. The pause was where he had practiced taking a breath. "When she was beaten and sent away pregnant, I did not know. The family hid it. I found out a month later, after you and your wife had already taken her in. I came once to the village. I stood at the road. I could not bring myself to walk up the path. I told myself she did not need to see me. The truth is, I did not want to see myself in her face." Jack did not speak. "For a year and a half," Bak Phuong said, "I have been trying to settle the land in my hometown. The land that should have been her dowry. The land my father left me with the understanding that it would go to my children one day. I have been working on it because it was the one thing I could still do for her, even from a distance." He pulled the folder toward him. He opened it. "It is done," he said. "The land is sold. The papers are settled. The proceeds are in a clean account." He looked at Jack. "I have come to give it to you, all of it, and to Tu Tien, and to my granddaughter when she is old enough." Jack looked at the folder. He did not pick it up. "Bak," he said carefully, "this is for Ly. It is not for me. Ly has refused." "What?" "I went to Nam's province last month. I waited for her at the small market, the one she goes to every Thursday. I told her about the land. I told her I had come to give it to her." Bak Phuong's voice was very level. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, Bull, you did not come when I needed you. You came when there was nothing left to come for. I have a daughter now. I have a husband now, who is not Nam. I have a life that does not include you. Please do not come back. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, and then she said one more thing. Bak Phuong continued. She said, if you want to give something to someone, give it to the people who came when no one asked them to. Give it to An Jack and Ly Tu Tien. They are the only family that found me when I was lost. The cicadas in the trees were very loud. That is why I am here, Jack. Bak Phuong's hands were folded again. They were still not entirely steady. I am not here because of guilt. I am here because my daughter, who has every right to refuse me, has told me where this money is supposed to go, and I am respecting her. Jack stood up and walked to the edge of the veranda. He looked out at the farm. At the half-finished pond Tu Tien had been digging for 3 weeks. At the bamboo poles he had just leaned against the fence, the ones that were going to be the chairs they would sit on in the afternoons. At the lotus rhizomes in the water trough by the back wall, waiting to be planted. He thought about Ly, about the mountain village, about the cloth in the cradle and the amber eyes and the day they had brought her home in Bak Zoom's truck. He thought about what it had cost Bak Phuong to go find her at the market and stand in front of her and hear her tell him no. He thought about what it must have cost Ly to say it. He turned around. Bak Phuong. Yes, drink the rest of your tea. Tu Tien will be home in about an hour. This is a conversation she should be part of from this point forward. I am not going to make any decisions about money without her in the room. Bak Phuong nodded once. His shoulders dropped slightly, not from disappointment, but from the small relief of a man who had been afraid of being told to leave. Yes, he said, that is correct. I will wait. Tu Tien came back at 1 in the afternoon with an empty basket and dirt on her knees. She came through the gate, saw Bak Phuong on the veranda, stopped for 1 second, the small visible recalibration of a person processing an unexpected guest, and then walked the rest of the way up the path without slowing. Bak Phuong, she said, calmly. It has been a long time. It has, Chi. Have you eaten? I have. Then, let me wash my hands, and I will come sit with you. She did not look at Jack. She did not need to. He had watched her face make 4 separate calculations in the time it took her to cross the yard, and they had all arrived at the same conclusion. Whatever was happening, she would sit down and find out, and then they would decide together. She washed her hands. She poured herself tea. She sat down. Bak Phuong has come about Ly, Jack said quietly. Tu Tien set her cup down very carefully. Is she all right? She is all right. Bak Phuong saw her last month. She is well. The baby is well. Jack paused. But Bak has come to do something he wants both of us to be here for. Bak Phuong looked at Tu Tien. He explained everything again. The land, the settlement, the conversation in the market, Ly's instruction. He did it more steadily. This time the second telling was easier than the first, and Tu Tien listened with her hands folded around her teacup and her face doing the still careful thing it did when she was hearing something large. When he finished, she did not speak for a moment. Bak, yes, Chi, you understand what Ly has done. I think so. She has given you a way to come back, not to her, to a family. She has chosen the family she wants you to be part of, since she cannot have you in hers. Tu Tien's voice was very gentle. That is not nothing. That is a great deal. Bak Phuong's eyes filled. He did not look away. I know, he said. I have known it for a month. I have been deciding whether I had the courage to accept it. And I am here. Tu Tien looked at Jack. Jack looked at Tu Tien. It was the look they had developed over 7 years, the one that did not need words because both of them already knew what the other one would say. The look that meant yes. The look that meant, of course. Jack picked up the folder. He moved it to the center of the table. He did not open it. back, he said. We accept what you want to give. We accept it for our family. And we want you to understand clearly, in front of both of us, that what you are giving is not what makes you welcome here. What makes you welcome is that you came. The money is a gift to Anna. The welcome is for you. Anna, their daughter, not yet born. 8 months along now, the morning sickness long past. The kicks Tu Tien felt at night becoming the small certain signals of a person already arriving. Bak Phuong looked at Tu Tien's belly. Then he looked away politely, the way men of his generation looked away from pregnant women out of respect rather than discomfort. Anna, he said softly. She will be born in this house? In this house, back, in the spring. In the spring. He nodded again. He could not seem to stop nodding. They signed the papers in the late afternoon. Tu Tien made fresh tea twice. Bak Phuong signed his name in 3 places. Jack signed in 2. The folder closed. The afternoon light came through the open veranda and caught on the lotus rhizomes in the water trough and made them look briefly green and alive. Bak Phuong stood up to leave. Stay for dinner? Bak Phuong? Tu Tien said. No, Chi. Not tonight. Tonight I need to drive home and sit alone for a while. There are things I need to think about. But if I may come back next week. Of course. And bring the chairs, he said. He looked at the bamboo poles leaning against the fence. He looked at the half-finished pond. Next week I would like to help you build them, if you will allow me. Jack looked at the older man. We will allow you back, he said. Bak Phuong nodded. He turned toward the gate. He took 3 steps, then he stopped. He turned back. He looked at Tu Tien, not at Jack, at Tu Tien. Chi, yes, back. I want to say something to you, just to you. Because Let told me to. Tu Tien set down her cup. Yes, back, she said. Tell Chi Tu Tien that she was the mother I should have been. Tell her I know. Tell her thank you. Tu Tien did not move for a moment. Then she stood up. She crossed the veranda. She did not say anything. She simply walked to Bak Phuong and bowed her head once, the small formal bow of a daughter to a father. And Bak Phuong, who had not expected this, made a small sound at the back of his throat and put his hand briefly on the top of her head, the way a father blesses a daughter at her wedding, the way a father does many things he was supposed to do years ago and is doing now, because now is the only time left. Then he turned and walked out the gate. Jack and Tu Tien sat on the veranda for a long time after he left. The afternoon light had gone gold. The cicadas had quieted. Somewhere by the back wall, the dogs were nosing around the lotus rhizomes that Jack would plant tomorrow morning. Tu Tien, yes. Are you all right? Yes. A pause. What did Ly mean? Jack asked carefully. By saying you were the mother she should have had. Tu Tien looked at him. Her face was wet. He had not noticed when it had become wet. Jack. She put her hand on her own belly. I never told you this. When Ly was here, the first month, she used to come and sit beside me when I cooked. She would not say anything. She would just sit. One day, she fell asleep with her head against my shoulder. I let her sleep. I sat very still so I would not wake her. Tu Tien wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. When she woke up, she said, Cheat, I am sorry. I was dreaming. I dreamed my mother was alive. I dreamed she was you. Jack was quiet. I never told you because I did not know what to do with it, Tu Tien said. I held it. For a year, I held it. She looked at her hand on her belly. Today Bak Phuong returned it. He did not know that was what he was doing. But that is what he did. Jack reached over and took her hand. The lotus rhizomes sat in their water trough waiting to be planted. The chairs by the pond were still unbuilt. The folder of papers sat on the wooden table, closed, with 2 signatures on it that had not been there this morning. Bak Phuong's car turned out of the road at the bottom of the hill. In the spring, Anna would be born in this house. And somewhere, in another province, Ly would receive the message that her father had been welcomed, and would know, in the particular way mothers know, that one of the doors she had closed had not closed entirely. Jack stood up. "Come on," he said. "Help me plant the lotus before the light goes." Tu Tien took his hand. They went down the steps together toward the pond. The chairs would be built next week. With Bac Phuong's hands and Jack's hands and bamboo poles that had been leaning against a fence on the morning everything changed.